The man held a gun pointed at my wife. She stayed completely calm, not flinching or blinking. Instead, she lifted one eyebrow and said, "Are you sure you want to go through with this, officer?" What he didn't realize yet was that this was not just my wife standing there. This was Sheriff Emily Monroe, and this fool had just made the biggest mistake of his miserable little HOA life. It all began with the mailbox. A petty, bright orange note slapped messily onto the front, as if it wanted to be seen from space. Notice of non-compliance. Mailbox paint color off regulation. Fix it within 72 hours to avoid a fine. There was no contact number, only a stamped logo that read East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board, which sounded like something from a cheesy HOA horror story. We had only been living here for 5 days. Boxes still unopened in the garage. The only things I'd managed so far were mowing the lawn and figuring out how to set the smart thermostat. I stared at that notice for a long time, trying to decide whether this was some dumb welcome prank or a serious attempt to intimidate us. Emily found me standing there with my coffee getting cold in my hand. "They don't like our mailbox," I muttered. She raised her eyebrow, glanced over the paper, and tilted her head just enough to make me smile. "What is the required color anyway? We just moved in," she asked. I tossed the notice onto the counter and quickly forgot about it. It was not until the second notice arrived 2 days later that things got serious. This one addressed a vehicle violation concerning parking in the driveway and causing an obstruction. The fine amounted to $125. Repeated offenses could lead to further actions. Emily's SUV was parked right in the middle of our driveway. It didn't block the sidewalk or face the wrong direction. It was simply parked there. Had we unknowingly bought a home in a gated community? I asked, half in jest, but Emily did not respond. Instead, she was already pulling up the property documents on her laptop. She tends to be quiet when something seems suspicious. I leaned over her shoulder, sipping my now reheated coffee, as she opened the deed and scrolled down to the small print. There it was, clearly highlighted. This property was not part of any active homeowners association. I let out a low whistle. So, who exactly were the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board? Emily didn't answer, simply bookmarked that section and saved the file under a new name. Evidence, no HOA PDF. I still wasn't fully convinced it was anything serious, maybe just an overzealous neighbor with a clipboard and too much free time. But the situation escalated the following morning. While I was outside trimming the hedge, trying to make our new house feel like home, I spotted a man on the other side of the street taking photos, not casual snapshots. He was aiming a camera with a telephoto lens directly at our garage. He wore a badge on his chest and had a radio clipped to his belt. Yet something about him seemed off. His boots were unnaturally clean, and his badge appeared too polished. His belt looked like something from a costume store. He caught me staring and approached, chest sticking out like a budget deputy. "Afternoon," he said. "I'm Sergeant Michael with the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board." I wiped the sweat from my brow and offered a forced smile. "I didn't know we had a neighborhood safety board." He nodded solemnly, pulled a laminated card from his back pocket, and held it up. It looked official at first until I noticed the expiration date. It clearly stated valid through December 2021. It was now 2025. "We handle compliance issues," he went on. "Community harmony. You've already had several violations." I tilted my head. "So, you're like a homeowners association?" "We're better than that," he said. "More responsive, less red tape." Then he hit me with the real deal. "We'll need to inspect your garage." I laughed, actually laughed. "That's not going to happen," I said. "And unless you have a warrant or a time machine to fix your expired badge, I suggest you move along." His eyes narrowed. "Non-compliance will be noted." He pulled out a notepad and started writing. I went inside, locked the door, and told Emily everything. She didn't laugh. Instead, she opened a county land use map, cross-referenced it with the East Summit plat, and confirmed what we were beginning to realize. This neighborhood safety board wasn't legally recognized, no tax filings, no incorporation, no registered nonprofit, just a name someone made up. She had attached a few printed citations along with some inexpensive badges. Emily contacted the county clerk while I reached out to my friend in code enforcement. Both confirmed the same thing. There was no homeowners association nor any neighborhood watch group officially registered. Whatever this was, it was entirely unauthorized. This was deception, I said. A clear impersonation of official power. It's also harassment, Emily added, as she opened a blank document titled Board Watch Initial Report. They were not going to quit. That was when we made a decision. I wanted to go straight to the sheriff's office and expose everything. Emily, always the strategist, insisted we needed more evidence. She had that spark in her eye, the one I had seen countless times when she conducted investigations into public corruption as the youngest sheriff in the county's history. "Let them believe we are just ordinary suburban residents," she said. "We will lay the trap. You handle the cameras, and I will start the log." By that evening, we had set up 4 motion-sensitive cameras, one above the garage, one tucked in the eaves overlooking the driveway, another concealed within the mailbox post, and the last hidden inside a decorative porch lantern. Emily printed every violation we had received and began noting dates and times on the whiteboard in the basement. On the 4th day, we caught him again. Michael approached our porch as if it belonged to him, snapping photos of our trash bins and pulling out a tape measure to check the distance between our hedges and the curb. He glanced around as if he realized it was wrong, but not wrong enough to make him stop. Then he reached into his small black folder and placed another orange slip on the door. This one stated, "Final warning, non-compliant landscaping. Immediate correction required." That was the breaking point. I watched the footage that night 3 times over. Slow motion, pause, enhance. His badge was aluminum. "You could see the porch light reflecting off the cheap engraving," Emily said as she froze the frame and zoomed in on the radio clipped to his belt. "That is not police-issued," she whispered. "It is a Bofang programmable, unregistered." She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "He is not just pretending to be part of the HOA. He is pretending to be law enforcement." I felt the hairs on my arms rise. "That is a felony." Emily nodded. "And he just committed it on our porch on camera while trespassing. We saved the footage to a secure drive and began backing up the records. 2 days later, another board member arrived. A different man this time, attempting to photograph our backyard through the fence slats. That was when it turned into a pattern, organized, coordinated. Emily began tracking the incidents: mailbox, vehicle, landscaping, trespass. Each time the same wording: the board, neighborhood safety mandate, violation. None of it lawful, yet all framed to appear legitimate. "They are creating the illusion of authority," she explained. "Banking. They did not question it at all." I said we couldn't have chosen the wrong house as I stared at the frozen image of Sergeant Michael walking toward our door, his plastic badge catching the sunlight. Emily smiled, but it was far from a joyful expression. It was the exact same look I had seen her give to a man in handcuffs once, moments before he understood who had set him up to fail. She said, "He has no clue who I am, and I believe it is time we change that." They returned on a Sunday, not with a knock or a polite notice, but with traffic cones, clipboards, and a megaphone as if we were trespassers on our own property. I was halfway through trimming the hedges when I heard gravel crunching and turned to see an old, rusty gray SUV backing into our driveway. 2 bright orange cones were thrown onto the concrete like they were marking a parade route or cordoning off a crime scene. A voice boomed through a battered megaphone that squeaked intermittently. "Attention homeowners! This property is currently under active inspection by the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board. Please stay inside your home until the evaluation is finished." Evaluation? Emily appeared at the screen door, wiping her hands with a dish towel and blinking as if she had just heard a raccoon place a breakfast order through a drive-through speaker. She asked, "Are they serious?" But her voice was already growing sharp. The SUV's doors opened simultaneously, and 3 men stepped out wearing worn tactical pants and polo shirts that looked like they had been bought in bulk. The bulk came from a militia-themed Etsy shop. Right in the middle stood our old acquaintance, Sergeant Michael, clutching a clipboard and flanked by two equally ridiculous deputies who looked like they had flunked out of mall security training. They wore earpieces that were connected to nothing and utility belts stocked with what I later recognized as a laser pointer, a walkie-talkie, and one had a multi-tool clipped on as if it were a badge of honor. I approached them calmly, phone in hand, already recording. "You are blocking my driveway," I said steadily, my thumb pressing the record button. "We have legal authority to inspect properties that don't comply," Michael declared, raising his clipboard as if it were a legal warrant. "You have broken 3 rules: hedge height, improper trash bin storage, and unauthorized signage." The sign in question was a small wooden welcome plaque Emily had bought at a craft fair, hanging from a hook near the door. "There is no HOA here," I reminded him. "You are trespassing." That was when one of his backup guys stepped forward, rested a hand on his hip, and said, "Sir, I'm going to need to see your ID." I blinked. For what reason? Failure to comply with community enforcement. The second man, a round-faced fellow wearing a chest rig filled with pens and a suspiciously unlabeled pepper spray canister, began filming us with his phone. "Subject appears agitated," he whispered into the mic that wasn't connected. "Non-cooperative male, possibly armed." I glanced down at my pruning shears, then back at the camera. Seriously? Emily had come outside, now as calm as the moon. She rested against the porch railing as if she had all the time in the world and watched silently while Michael strode forward and reached for his badge. That was when she noticed it. The design was incorrect. The emblem engraved in the center was not just cheap. It was a distorted, blurry version of our real county sheriff's badge. The star had 6 points instead of 7. The eagle was flipped. The font was a ridiculous mismatch. But it did not end there. They were attempting to imitate her department, not some imaginary neighborhood watch group. No, they were impersonating her. Emily said nothing at first. Her eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with calculation. She looked at Michael as though she were sizing him up for a coffin. I recognized that look. "You guys always come onto private property flashing that?" she asked sweetly. Michael straightened up. "This badge gives me authority in this area," he said. Emily returned a polite smile. Interesting. We just let them dig their own graves. They kept photographing our garage and measured the distance from the front porch to the curb as if planning a bombing strike, then handed us a paper stapled to a pamphlet titled Community Code Book E-Summit Edition. There was no author, no date, no references, just bold titles and threats. That night we added the... "They attempted to imitate my identification badge," Emily said softly. "This goes beyond mere trespassing. It is now a second-degree felony under county law, possibly more serious if used as a tool for extorting residents, which is exactly what we uncovered." During the following week, neighbors began approaching us in confidence. A woman named Ellen, who lived 2 houses away, quietly told us at the grocery store she had been charged $150 for overly elaborate porch lighting. Jim from the cul-de-sac showed us a citation he received for illegal yard flags after putting up a football team banner. A family on the corner found their children's trampoline marked with a vivid pink violation notice for unauthorized recreational equipment. These were not simply bogus regulations. The entire neighborhood was being exploited financially, and most residents, older and retired with politeness to the extreme, were afraid to speak out. Emily created a secure Google Drive folder to save every single document, photo, and interview. Faces were blurred to protect privacy, but the names of the officials were left visible. Michael, McCrae, Hollowell each wore badges that closely resembled those of the sheriff's department, down to the embroidered details. Meanwhile, fraudulent violation notices continued to show up. They had started mailing them, likely to avoid being caught on our cameras again, and their tactics were becoming more brazen. One letter even accused us of intentional wrongdoing. Disruption of community peace and citing a fabricated law, East Summit Code 14.3b, which did not actually exist in any legal texts. We checked thoroughly, and it turned out to be pure fiction. That was when Emily said, "It's time to head to the meeting." Each month, the self-designated board hosted a public engagement event at the clubhouse located down the hill. an old recreation center left over from when this neighborhood had an HOA back in the early 2000s. That HOA had been officially dissolved and we confirmed it, yet they had taken control of the venue regardless. That evening we entered quietly. There were about a dozen folding chairs, a projector, and a man standing at the front holding a pointer and carrying a fanny pack stuffed with printed documents. Michael sat on the far side, leaning against the wall, looking as smug as a cat with a mouthful of feathers. The board president was positioned in the center of the room, a tall, thin man with slicked-back hair and a voice that oozed the smoothness of a used car salesman. "Thank you all for coming," he declared. "Tonight, we will be voting on new vehicle restrictions, fence height changes, and monthly compliance assessments." "Wait a minute," I interrupted, raising my hand. "Who exactly granted you the authority to suggest these changes?" The man blinked. "We are the Neighborhood Safety Board, sir." "Elected by whom?" Emily asked. The man bristled. "We don't need elections. We are volunteers preserving the order of this community." "Order?" Emily repeated, pulling a document from her folder. "Then perhaps you would care to explain this." She raised a photo of the counterfeit badge, Michael's badge. The atmosphere in the room changed. The projector buzzed softly. Silence fell. Michael stood up. "We do not answer to civilians," he snapped. "We uphold the rules. If you have a problem with that—" "I do," Emily said firmly. "A big one." Michael stepped forward. The room grew tense. Everyone leaned closer, sensing something was about to break. Then he reached into his belt and pulled out what appeared to be a firearm. Later we learned it was a pellet gun, but in that moment it looked real, and he aimed it at my wife. "Step back," he warned. "All of you. Meeting's over." Chairs scraped back. People gasped. Someone let out a scream. I was frozen, but Emily stayed calm. She took one deliberate step forward and said, "I'm Sheriff Emily Monroe. Put down the weapon," she told Michael. His mouth dropped open. The badge in his hand suddenly seemed like a mere toy. "You're lying. Want to prove me wrong?" she challenged. "My dispatch is on speed dial and waiting for my check-in right now." "That gun you're holding just turned from trespassing to armed criminal impersonation." He faltered, blinked, trembled, then dropped the gun. It hit the floor with a dull clack, and the entire room exhaled in relief. Emily didn't even glance at it. She walked past him, took the projector remote from the board president's hand, and switched off the screen. "This board is dissolved," she declared, "effective immediately." No one dared to object. The silence was absolute. In one moment, Sergeant Michael was standing there with a weapon pointed at my wife's chest, his chest puffed out as if he were expecting applause. Then suddenly, he was the one holding his breath. Emily had not raised her voice. She did not reach for anything. All she did was take a slow, intentional step forward, lock her gaze on him as if ordering food, and say the words that turned the entire room upside down. "I'm Sheriff Emily Monroe. Put the weapon down." Time seemed to bend in that moment. Michael blinked twice, his mouth slightly open like he was trying to understand English on the spot. You could read it on his face. That flash of dawning horror when someone realizes they just made a terrible mistake. The pistol in his hand suddenly looked like it was glowing with danger. His fingers twitched, his knees locked, and for a brief second I honestly thought he might run. But Emily didn't move. She didn't need to. Calmly, she reached for her radio, clipped inside her coat all along, and pressed the button. "Dispatch, this is Monroe. I'm at East Summit Community Center. Suspect impersonating law enforcement, possibly armed. Request immediate backup. Advise all units. Subject may be part of an organized impersonation ring." The radio crackled. "Copy. Sheriff units en route. Estimated arrival 5 minutes. Confirm." "Suspect in custody?" "Not yet," she answered calmly, still working on it. Michael's hand opened like a rusty hinge. The weapon! The sound of something clattering onto the laminate tile echoed through the room, and someone in the back gasped, likely the only noise made since she had spoken. He stepped back with his hands raised, and for the first time all night he appeared small. Emily did not gloat. She did not shout. She did not even touch him. She simply gestured toward the folding chair he had occupied earlier and said, "Sit." Like an obedient dog, he complied. The rest of the room fell apart like soggy cardboard. The board president staggered backward into the projector screen. One of the deputies wearing a tactical belt slipped on his own clipboard while trying to edge toward the exit. People began standing, whispering, and capturing the moment on their phones. I noticed an older man, perhaps in his 70s, quietly shaking his head and mumbling that something had always felt off about those damn cones. The board's treasurer attempted to act nonchalant, as if this did not concern her, as if she were merely attending a slideshow about hedge regulations. Emily was having none of it. "Ma'am," she said, turning toward her, "do not move. We will be dealing with all this once backup arrives." "I didn't know," the woman stammered. "They just said we were allowed to help out. Volunteer patrols, they called it. I didn't know." Emily's voice was calm, but her words struck like blows. "You did not know you were issuing printed fines with no legal authority or trespassing on private property with fake badges? Because ignorance does not make something lawful." 10 minutes later, the room was bursting with actual deputies dressed in black uniforms, flashing lights illuminating the outside. Tactical vests and serious faces filled the space. They arrived like a wave of authority, not with weapons drawn yet, but with clear intent. Michael was promptly handcuffed and escorted to the back of a cruiser. The pellet gun was tagged and sealed in a bag. One deputy took Emily's statement, while another started gathering identification from everyone sporting a clipboard, vest, or badge. And yes, all of them wore badges not issued by any official department, but printed on shiny plastic, clipped to their belts like costumes for Halloween. The most disturbing part was that they had fully committed to their roles. They carried laminated IDs, small booklets of community regulations, and even a list of residents with color-coded risk levels. I know this because one of the deputies, a young man named Ortiz, proudly displayed it like a trophy. "You have to see this," he whispered to Emily. They were monitoring people as if they were gang members. One section labeled uncooperative residents included names, addresses, and records of violations. Ours listed 9 offenses: mailbox color, parked vehicle, unauthorized flag, trash bin violation day, non-standard welcome sign, excessive lawn watering, and unfriendly attitude. That last one had 2 stars. And finally, a possible false ID accusation. The spouse might be impersonating an officer. I am not joking. They had even accused Emily of impersonating herself. I saw her grin as she read that part. "That's a new one," she said. "I have arrested Bank." The managers who were more discreet included Deputy Rayner, who had served under Emily for 7 years. He approached, holding his phone, and said, "Ma'am, one of the IDs we just scanned matches a known offender. The man, calling himself the security chief of the board, goes by Bryce McCrae. He served 3 years for impersonating a public official downstate." Emily didn't even flinch. Add another charge to his record. Already done. They had barely made a dent. As more statements came in, it became obvious this was not just a handful of irritable neighbors playing dress-up. This was an orchestrated scam. Fake citations were being sent out weekly. Residents were paying fines through a digital portal that led back to a PayPal account registered under ESNSB, the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board. Guess whose name was on the account? The president of the board's nephew, a 25-year-old living in a nearby town working as a freelance graphic designer. And that was just the beginning. One of the deputies noticed a van parked behind the community center. Inside were boxes filled with printed warning slips, traffic cones, violation packets, and an actual binder titled Escalation Protocols. The instructions inside were so thorough it gave me chills. Stage 1, verbal warnings. Stage 2, written citations. Stage 3, confrontations. Stage 4, tactical deterrence. Tactical deterrence. They even had guidelines for calmly but firmly showing weapons to encourage obedience. I nearly lost my lunch. All of this happening in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The neighborhood where the most serious crime in the past year had been a raccoon sneaking into someone's pantry. Emily managed the intake from a table tucked in the corner, sorting through statements and identification cards with a face carved from stone. She wasn't smiling. This was not a victory for her. This was damage control. The worst kind, the kind that shatters trust, because these people weren't just bothering us. They were exploiting retirees and targeting single mothers. One resident came forward and claimed they had paid over $900 in bogus fines out of fear of eviction. Another received warnings about hosting too many people after throwing a birthday party for their 10-year-old. The safety board, that fake self-important enforcement committee, had weaponized their authority to instill fear, and they were profiting handsomely from it. We didn't yet fully understand the extent, not back then. But as the deputies loaded boxes into squad cars and seized hard drives from the community center's small office, Emily turned to me and said, "They weren't pretending to be a homeowners association. They were pretending to be me." I stayed silent. I just wrapped my arm around her shoulder and gave a reassuring squeeze. She wasn't rattled. Not truly. She was furious. Furious like an earthquake that hadn't yet cracked the surface. And as the squad cars drove away, their taillights fading into the night, one thing was certain. East Summit would never be the same. The neighbors who once kept their previously bowed heads were now fully alert. The fragile illusion of safety, like a thin veil, had been lifted to expose something far worse. A coalition of petty despots donned in gleaming badges and khaki uniforms. The only silver lining was that they were all documented, charged, arrested, and extremely vulnerable. It began with a flyer, nothing fancy, just a plain white sheet affixed to every mailbox, every lamppost, and each community board from East Summit to Maple Ridge. Community Town Hall, Know Your Rights, led by Sheriff Emily Monroe. No elaborate fonts, no counterfeit logos, no fabricated orders, just straightforward truth printed in bold black ink. The moment these flyers appeared, you could sense a change in the atmosphere. That cautious silence that had settled over our neighborhood for months, where people whispered about warnings and fines, where doors stayed shut and blinds remained closed, began to fade. Gradually, almost cautiously, neighbors emerged from their homes. They gathered on sidewalks, leaned over fences, quietly asking one another, "Are you going to the town hall? Is it safe now? Did you hear? They actually arrested that guy, the fake sergeant." On the evening of the meeting, the community center parking lot was filled by 6:30. Cars lined the curb all the way down the hill on the next block. Some people carried folding chairs. Others brought their children. I recognized at least a dozen faces from earlier confrontations, people who had once avoided eye contact or refused to speak out of fear. Now they arrived in pairs, in groups. Some carried printed violation notices inside manila envelopes, others held notebooks ready to record names. Emily entered the building last. She did not slip in through the side door or wear plain clothes like she had during those staged board meetings. No, this time she came dressed in full uniform. The sheriff's badge shone brightly, her gun securely holstered, silver stars gleaming on her collar. And when she walked up to the podium, the room did not burst into applause. It did not have to. Instead, it fell completely silent, like a courtroom just before a verdict was announced. She began with the basics. "My name is Sheriff Emily Monroe," she announced, her voice calm but clear, reaching every corner of the room. "I live here. I've been living here for 6 months. You may have seen me walking my dog. You have probably also noticed men and women wandering around this neighborhood in fake uniforms, handing out bogus fines and threatening real consequences." There were nods, murmurs. Someone at the back whispered, "Finally." Emily continued, "Let me be perfectly clear. There is no legally recognized homeowners association operating in East Summit. There is no neighborhood safety board. And there is no authority whatsoever behind the citations, inspections, or so-called tactical enforcement that many of you have faced over the past year." She stepped aside and gestured to the table next to her, where Deputy Ortiz had laid out the evidence, photos, documents, a display board titled "The Scam," explaining how they truly went all out, issuing detailed fines, using counterfeit badges and replicas, even including one of the plastic vests with the words "Board Enforcement" printed across the chest in cracked vinyl. Emily held up a printed citation for non-compliant porch decorations and said it had been given to an 84-year-old woman simply for hanging a wind chime that made too much noise. The woman was warned that if she did not pay within 72 hours, her home would face a compliance lockout. Emily emphasized that this was not only cruel, but also illegal. There were audible gasps from the crowd, genuine and not staged for dramatic effect. People were not just discovering the scam, they were coming to terms with the fact that they had been deceived. Emily moved on to explain the charges. Sergeant Michael, whose real name is Gregory Dalton, was now charged with felony impersonation, criminal trespassing, attempted assault with a weapon, and fraud. She revealed that the board president, Leonard Brandt, had diverted over $32,000 in falsified fine income into his personal accounts. Investigators had also found evidence of plans to extend the scheme to 3 neighboring communities using the same fraudulent HOA model. Emily described it as the creation of an empire of fear, built one fake warning at a time, knocking door to door. The audience fell silent again, but this time it was not fear. It was a deep, controlled, slow-burning anger. After letting the silence linger, Emily delivered the closing statement. Every individual who paid a fine will receive compensation. Each victim who was threatened, harassed, or recorded without permission will be contacted by their office, and the neighbor cooperating with this investigation will receive protection from our witness coordination team. This is far from over. It is merely the start. A man standing near the front, Mr. Pallet Jennings, whose wife had wept when threatened with lien notices, stood up and asked, "Sheriff, what do we do if someone attempts this again?" Emily didn't even hesitate. She said, "You call me." After the town hall meeting, people did not rush out immediately. They stayed behind. They conversed. For the first time since we had moved here, neighbors smiled at each other openly, without any distrust. Emily remained outside for more than an hour, shaking hands, hearing stories, and writing down names. A teenage boy handed her the bogus citation his family received for having unlicensed sports equipment after leaving a soccer net in their yard. She assured him she would fix the issue. A retired couple showed her a homemade HOA directive that they were instructed to display in their window under threat of escalation. She told them not to discard it, explaining, "We are building a case," and build it she did. Within 2 weeks, every member of the so-called safety board was officially served with notices. 3 arrests followed. 5 others were hit with civil fines. Even the man who created their fake badges was questioned. He was an out-of-town Etsy seller who thought it was just for a costume party. The county seized the eSummit domain name. The PayPal account was frozen. As for the recreation center, it now displayed a genuine Community Watch sign outside thanks to the efforts put in. The sheriff's department was operated not by vigilantes but by neighbors and volunteers, people who always asked permission first and never aimed anything at your face. As for Sergeant Michael Dalton, his walk of shame took place the next Friday morning right past our driveway. I was outside trimming the hedge when the unmarked car arrived. He was in handcuffs, wearing the same vest he had on the first time we met, now dirty and torn. I remained silent, just watching as 2 deputies escorted him down the sidewalk, past our mailbox, and past the spot where he once left a violation taped with red duct tape that read, "Final warning. Landscape non-compliance." That very sign Emily had framed and hung in her office behind her desk, with bold hand-painted letters above it saying, "Nice try." People laughed whenever they saw it. Visitors, reporters, deputies. It became a local legend, a quiet reminder that the best revenge does not need to be loud. It just needs to endure. Some neighbors still keep their porch lights on a little later now. Others leave their blinds half open instead of shutting them tight. A few houses even came together and threw a block party on the anniversary of the arrest. They called it Freedom from Fines Friday. Emily brought cookies. I brought a Bluetooth speaker and played AC/DC. No tickets were handed out, only laughter. Emily still gets called the Sheriff of Suburbia by the kids, and truth be told, I believe she enjoys it. But it is more than just a nickname. The message is clear. No matter how peaceful a neighborhood appears, there is always someone observing, someone keeping track. And if you are foolish enough to aim a weapon at the sheriff on her own property, you should be prepared to find yourself displayed in her office beneath 2 simple words that say it all: good effort.